All right, chapter 9 of The Power of Now. It's called Beyond Happiness and Unhappiness, There is Peace. I love this chapter. This is a great chapter. And he starts out by talking about the difference between inner peace and happiness. And I love how he distinguishes between the two. He says, happiness depends on conditions being perceived as positive, and inner peace does not. So inner peace does not depend on conditions. Happiness depends on conditions being perceived as positive. Inner peace does not. And I love how he says perceived as positive. So not even necessarily positive, just that you think conditions are positive. That's enough for happiness. I love that definition. I look at it like the weather. Like, let's say it's pouring rain. Like a few days ago, my daughter and I went to go get ice cream downtown, and we ran in the pouring rain. And we were laughing and giggling, and it was so fun. And we got soaked, and she said, "Dad, that was so much fun. I had a blast." And, we could have just as easily gone, "Oh no, the rain, it wrecked our trip. And I hate when it rains." And it's, so the condition is it rained, right? And how we perceived it is either what made happiness or not happiness. It shows you how powerful our thinking is. So the next question in the book is, if we just think positively all the time, can we only have positive experiences? It's a legit question. I really like how Eckhart answers this. I'm going to just read this. He says, "Do you truly know what is positive and what is negative? Do you have the total picture? There have been many people for whom limitation, failure, loss, illness, or pain in whatever form turned out to be their greatest teacher. It taught them to let go of false self-images and superficial, ego-dictated goals and desires. It gave them depth, humility, and compassion. It made them more real." That is so crucial. I read a lot of different self-help style books, and some of them are very much all about whatever you want, go get, manifest your dreams, whatever will make you happy, you deserve them. And, this is in response to all of our negative thinking. So in that way, I think that's a good thing. But there's something interesting about just going after whatever you think will make you happy as the ultimate goal. Because, in my own experience, I've worked extremely hard for things that I knew would make me happy. And when I finally got them, they did make me happy for a short time. And then those same things no longer made me happy. And it was like, there's something interesting here. There's something interesting going on with this. When I reflect on the biggest moments of growth in my own life, they didn't come from getting the things I thought would make me happy. They came from the hardest times in my life. They came from the moments of sorrow, of rock bottom. Those were my best teachers. And so he then goes on to say, whenever anything negative happens to you, there's a deep lesson concealed within it, although you may not see it at the time. Even a brief illness or accident can show you what is real and unreal in your life, what ultimately matters and what doesn't. That's definitely true in my own experience. He then says, seen from a higher perspective, conditions are always positive. To be more precise, they are neither positive nor negative. They are as they are. And when you live in complete acceptance of what is, which is the only sane way to live, there is no good or bad in your life anymore. There is only a higher good, which includes the bad. Seen from the perspective of the mind, however, there is good and bad, like and dislike, love and hate. So Eckhart is really challenging us here to live in complete acceptance of what is. If it's raining, it is as it is, without the good-bad polarities. So this next section, the question is asked, that sounds a little bit like denial or self-deception. When something dreadful happens to me or close to me, accidents, illness, death, I can pretend that it isn't bad, but the fact remains that it is bad, so why deny it? That's a very legitimate question. And Eckhart responds in this way. He says, you're not pretending anything. You're allowing it to be as it is. That's all. This allowing to be takes you beyond the mind with its resistance patterns that creates positive negative polarities. It's an essential aspect of forgiveness. And then he goes on to say, remember that we're not talking about happiness here. For example, when a loved one has just died or you feel your own death approaching, you cannot be happy. It's impossible. But you can be at peace. There may be sadness and tears, but provided you have relinquished resistance, underneath the sadness, you will feel a deep serenity, a stillness, a sacred presence. I think it's so helpful to talk about the difference between happiness and inner peace, especially because most of us are seeking happiness and we're believing that if we can just get all the conditions in our life to be positive, we'll finally be happy. And he's talking about inner peace is something that is not dependent on those conditions in your life. I love that distinction. So, all right, let's move on to the next big idea of this chapter. Life drama. So the next big idea is called the end of your life drama. And the question is asked, if you live in a state of full acceptance of what is, can bad things still come into your life? And so Eckhart answers it in this way. He says, most of the so-called bad things that happen in people's lives are due to unconsciousness. Most. They are self-created, or rather ego-created. I sometimes refer to those things as drama. When you are fully conscious, drama does not come into your life anymore. Let me remind you briefly how the ego operates and how it creates drama. Okay, ego. Ego is the unobserved mind that runs your life when you're not present as the witnessing consciousness, the watcher. So ego is when we're on autopilot, when we're not engaged, when we're lost in our thoughts, the unobserved mind, this is ego. The ego perceives itself as a separate fragment in a hostile universe with no real interconnection to any other being, surrounded by other egos, which it either sees as a potential threat or which it will attempt to use for its own ends. The basic ego patterns are designed to combat its own deep-seated fear and sense of lack. They are resistance, control, power, greed, defense, attack. Some of the ego's strategies are extremely clever, yet never truly solve any of its problems, simply because the ego itself is the problem. I love that. That's so true. So many of our ego-related problems we try to solve, and we don't get anywhere because that problem is not the real problem. The ego itself is the problem. So when he's talking about drama, he says, when you feel sorry for yourself, that's drama. When you feel guilty or anxious, that's drama. When you let the past or future obscure the present, you're creating time, psychological time, the stuff out of which drama is made. Whenever you are not honoring the present moment by allowing it to be, you're creating drama. Most people are in love with their particular life drama. Their story is their identity. I'm going to read that again. Their story is their identity. The ego runs their life. They have their whole sense of self invested in it. Even their usually unsuccessful search for an answer, a solution, or for healing becomes part of it. What they fear and resist most is the end of their drama. As long as they are their mind, what they fear and resist most is their own awakening. Now, we all know people like this where their entire personality, their entire identity is their past, or sometimes their future, where they're heading. I can think of multiple people where every time you speak with that person, they bring up their history or their injury or their problems or their past, and their whole identity is based on their story. Now, I'm not judging anyone. I do that. We all do that. And the purpose of this is not to point out where we see that in other people. It's for us to ask ourselves, in what way do I do that? In what way am I in love with my own life drama. That's the challenge for us. So Eckhart says, when you live in complete acceptance of what is, that is the end of all drama in your life. Nobody can even have an argument with you, no matter how hard he or she tries. You can't have an argument with a fully conscious person. I love this definition of an argument. An argument implies identification with your mind and a mental position, as well as resistance and reaction to the other person's position. The result is that the polar opposites become mutually energized. These are the mechanics of unconsciousness. You can still make your point clearly and firmly, but there will be no reactive force behind it, no defense or attack, so it won't turn into drama. When you are fully conscious, you cease to be in conflict. So I love how he says, you can still make your point clearly and firmly. You know, he's not saying just be quiet and don't bother anybody or don't share your opinion or upset anyone, don't get in any conflict. He's saying, no, you can share your opinion firmly and clearly, but don't turn it into drama. Don't turn it into arguing. Think about if we use this strategy for difficult topics like politics or religion or things like this, if we didn't let them become drama and arguing over mental positions, think how much better they would go. So let's go on to the last big idea of this chapter. Negativity and inner resistance. This is the last big idea that I want to talk about. Eckhart talks about how these two ideas are basically synonymous with each other. And we tend to use negativity and inner resistance as a way to unconsciously try to control the conditions in our lives and manipulate the world to go how we want it to go. And of course, this doesn't totally work, but there's some part of us that believes if I resist the traffic, if I resist the weather, if I fight with it, that it'll somehow transform into something better. You know, if we didn't somehow unconsciously believe this, why would we create all this resistance? Why wouldn't we just say, oh great, there's tons of traffic. I accept it as it is. There's something in us that says, if I fight with this, I can change it. And so that's what this next section is about. So Eckhart says, all inner resistance is experienced as negativity in one form or another. All negativity is resistance. In this context, the two words are almost synonymous. Negativity ranges from irritation or impatience to fierce anger, from a depressed mood or resentment to suicidal despair. Sometimes resistance triggers the emotional pain body, in which case even a minor situation may produce intense negativity, such as anger, depression, or deep grief. The ego believes that through negativity, it can manipulate reality to get what it wants. It believes that through it, it can attract a desirable condition or dissolve an undesirable one. The book, A Course in Miracles, rightly points out, whenever you are unhappy, there's an unconscious belief that the unhappiness buys you what you want. If you, the mind, did not believe that unhappiness works, why would you create it? The fact is, of course, that negativity does not work. Instead of attracting a desirable condition, it stops it from arising. Instead of dissolving an undesirable one, it keeps it in place. Its only useful function is that it strengthens the ego, and that's why the ego loves it. So whenever you're feeling negativity arising within you, whether caused by an external factor, a thought, or even nothing in particular that you're aware of, look on it as a voice saying, attention, here and now, wake up. Even the slightest irritation is significant and needs to be acknowledged and looked at. Otherwise, there will be a cumulative buildup of unobserved reactions. If you cannot drop it, just accept that it's there and take your attention into the feeling. So here he has a little spiritual practice of a practical thing that you can do to actually try this. He says, I recommend that you practice it with little, even trivial things first. Let's say you're sitting quietly at home. Suddenly, there's a penetrating sound of a car alarm from across the street. Irritation arises. What's the purpose of the irritation? None whatsoever. Why did you create it? You didn't. The mind did. It was totally automatic, totally unconscious. Why did the mind create it? Because it holds the unconscious belief that its resistance, which you experience as negativity or unhappiness in some form, will somehow dissolve the undesirable condition. This, of course, is a delusion. The resistance that it creates, the irritation or anger in this case, is far more disturbing than the original cause that it's attempting to dissolve. All of this can be transformed into a spiritual practice. Allow the noise, or whatever caused the negative reaction, to pass right through you. It's no longer hitting a solid wall inside you. As I said, practice with the little things first. The car alarm, the dog barking, the children screaming, the traffic jam. Instead of having a wall of resistance inside you that gets constantly and painfully hit by things that should not be happening, let everything pass through you. Somebody says something to you that's rude or designed to hurt. Instead of going into unconscious reaction and negativity, such as attack, defense, or withdrawal, you let it pass right through you. Offer no resistance. It's as if there was no one there to get hurt anymore. That is forgiveness. In this way, you become invulnerable. You can still tell that person that his or her behavior is unacceptable, if that's what you choose to do. But that person no longer has the power to control your inner state. You are then in your power, not in someone else's, nor are you run by your mind. Whether it is a car alarm, a rude person, a flood, an earthquake, or the loss of all your possessions, the resistance mechanism is the same. So that's our challenge for this week. Thank you guys for watching this video. I love making these videos. And like always, rather than asking you to like or subscribe this channel, I'm going to ask you to turn off your screens, go outside, and enjoy the present moment. So we'll see you in the last video of this series for Chapter 10 as we wrap up The Power of Now. Thanks so much.